solid clap today.
Nice.
Feel really good about it.
It was good.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, welcome back to Student Night Live House Parties. Excited to be with you guys. We got a couple announcements that we're gonna make here. I think we should make them. You want to let me know what's going on in a couple weeks?
I have no idea what you're talking about, so fire away.
Well, it has to do with some mandates that have changed.
I love it when this happens. You set me up for something I'm just totally oblivious. Yeah, we got permission to go back into homes.
Woo!
So, yeah, like official. Not tonight, but next Wednesday.
Not next Wednesday.
That's going to be our last one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's not
you kind of set it up like you were saying next Wednesday is when we...
Yeah, not tonight, but next Wednesday, next student night, that's going to be our last time in Zoe's until like the next student night or whatever. But basically, April 14th, I think it is, that's going to be our first night in homes.
Yeah, and so we're really excited. We're going to keep those going throughout the course of the summer, and we're going to let you guys know our summer plans here pretty soon too. But with things opening up, it gives us a lot more potential and possibilities to do fun things with you guys. So we're going to have a lot of barbecues. We got some fun events that we're looking into doing, and potentially even a mission trip.
Yeah.
And so I floated it out to some parents. They seem excited. I know some of you guys would love to go and to be a part of that. So if we're able to get in, we're going to lock that down, and we will definitely let you guys know soon. But next week, we're going to have some little handouts for you guys with the locations of your house parties so that we can give them to you.
Yeah.
We'll email them to parents. We're really thrilled and excited. And we'll still do some student night stuff when we all gather back together. And, once we're actually back in homes, the cool thing is then we could actually bring back the worship night student night.
That would be cool.
Which would be really fun. Hopefully we'll have somebody new hired for that role pretty soon here. So, yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Anyways, things have been happening in the world. Let's do some slices.
Do you want to go first?
No, I like when you go first.
Okay, great. So there was this man in England, and his neighbor put their house up for sale. And I think it was like just the British equivalent of Zillow. If you don't know what Zillow is, basically you can go online, see what homes are for sale, and you can look at pictures of the inside.
I spend a lot of
home.
time on Zillow just looking at homes, going like, man, that'd be a really fun home to own.
Yeah, so this guy was really curious about what the inside of his neighbor's house looked like. And when he went through the pictures, he started seeing all these pictures of his cat.
His own cat?
His own cat.
Wow.
His cat had been cheating on him. His cat lived in his neighbor's house as much as he lived in his house. Like, he thought the cat was out just like chasing mice or like, I don't know, doing random cat things. I don't like cats. I know you have cats.
My kids like cats a lot.
But yeah, there was just this picture of this cat just like sleeping on his neighbor's bed.
You know, it's a lot better to find pictures of your cat in somebody else's house than maybe like your own family.
Yeah, for sure.
like pictures of your kids or your wife hanging out.
That would be bad.
That would be really, really bad.
But for a cat, it's expected. I don't trust cats. Like, I think
I'm really curious why somebody wrote a news article about this.
I think it's fascinating.
Well, it's fascinating, but like, who goes, you know what? Boom, there's our next headliner. Man's cat lives in another man's house, finds pictures.
I think it's funny.
All right, so Valentine's Day just happened recently, and for whatever reason,
like a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
Hope you didn't miss it.
Hope you didn't miss it. But sometimes people find these really random, weird ways to try to show their love and their commitment to other people. Add to that social media and Instagram and people just wanting to get a bunch of followers. People are bound to do some really wild things. There was a Ukrainian couple, and actually the reason I thought about this has to do with that pooping video you talked about last week. So you'll understand why in a second. This guy and his girlfriend decided that for 3 months they were going to be handcuffed to each other and would not take off these handcuffs for the entire 3-month period. And it started on Valentine's Day, and it was a way for them to show each other their love and their commitment, their devotion. Can you imagine?
Did they break up?
No, they're still together. They're still handcuffed together. You can go on Instagram. I'll try to drop their screen name here, but like you could literally go and follow their entire journey. And the one question people have always had is, what do you do when you got to go to the bathroom?
Yep.
And so they're like, well, one of us stands outside and the other one just holds their arm in there, and I'm like, how small is your bathroom? Or I don't really know.
It's Ukraine.
It's Ukraine.
Probably pretty small.
Soviet blocks, man. But I could not fathom the amount of fights that me and my wife would have if we were handcuffed to each other for 3 months. Like,
yeah. There'd be a lot of yanking during fights.
A lot of yanking, but like, you know how some people, they like to get away from the other person?
Yeah.
Like, you literally could not do that. And what about sleeping? Like, do you do your right hands? And what if you need to roll over? Do they got to roll over with you? It's like you're permanently...
Like scratch your face.
Yeah, it's like you're either permanently on your stomach or you're permanently on your back. And then if you have to pee in the middle of the night, they've got to get up with you? I don't know.
Yeah. Or wiping.
Yeah,
You
like,
either have to use your dominant hand if it's free, or learn to use your non-dominant
so
hand.
one person actually probably has their dominant hand free and the other one doesn't.
Or your hand just gets taken along for the ride.
Honey, would you... Oh my gosh, I could not even...
We're 12.
We are 12.
Nathan and I are 12.
The good thing is we probably have a couple 12-year-olds here with us in the room.
Yeah.
So. Awesome. Well, hey, let's get into what we have for tonight. We are wrapping up our series on the Ten Commandments. And I don't know about you guys. Like, this has been a pretty fun series for me to
I've
even
loved
go
it.
through.
It's
Because,
cool.
like, you know, for a lot of people, you grow up, and when you're in, like, CC Kids, Tiny Tots, you know, Sunday school, whatever you want to call it, like, these are things that you talk about. But as you get older, we really move away from talking about these things. But hopefully you've seen, like, these are actually pretty fundamental to what it means to be human and to experience life.
Absolutely.
And flourishing. And so even after we're done with this series, I would love to encourage you guys, like, revisit it.
Yeah.
You know, this is like a really great metric to say, like, hey, how am I doing? Like, do I have something in my life that's weighing me down, holding me back? Am I not experiencing the life that I need to? Or maybe go back to the plans and the design that God's given us.
Yep. I'm going to be thinking about it for a long time.
Good. Especially that idolatry one sets in. I know you've got some statues on your desk that I've been meaning to talk to you about.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that here.
Let's not talk about
There's
that
no
here.
statues.
All right. So to kick this off, you know, in the book of Genesis, towards the end of it, there's the story of a young guy by the name of Joseph. You know that story? Hopefully
do.
you guys know that story. Joseph was the youngest of all of his brothers, and he was also the favorite of his father. Any of you guys the favorite of your children? Or of your parents? Are you the favorite child of your parents? There we go. Yeah, so if you have ever been like an older sibling who's had a younger sibling who always seems like their parents give them the better end of the deal, like, you can totally understand how frustrating that is, right? That's kind of where Joseph's brothers were at. I mean, like, this kid, he got the special clothes, he got the special favor, he always got more stuff than his brothers, and his brothers, they ended up resenting him for it.
Yep.
Right? And
They were pretty jealous.
Pretty jealous, right? And if you read the story, like, they absolutely hated it. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that, like, they wanted what Joseph had. And if you read kind of to the end of this story before it goes into Exodus, you'd find out, like, how they acted on that. And basically they beat the crap out of him, threw him in a hole and sold him into slavery, and convinced their dad that he was killed by some wild beast out in the wilderness.
Yep. And then he was a slave.
And then he was a slave for, like, but then he ended up, like, you know, saving basically his whole family and a bunch of other people. But the point being, like, this jealousy that Joseph's brothers felt towards him, it ended up being this, like, really destructive thing, not only in Joseph's life, but also in their own lives. Like, and you read a little bit more about that in Genesis. And I think it's this thing that we see time and time again all throughout history. Like, when jealousy enters the equation, like, bad things tend to happen.
Yeah.
Which is why I think we've actually been given this 10th commandment.
Yeah, and I don't think we can let Joseph off the hook here
No.
either, because, like, everything that was being given to him belonged to his older brother.
Yeah.
Like, his oldest brother.
Yeah.
So he had, like, 9 or 10 older brothers that, like, every single one of them was angry at Joseph because the youngest was getting what the oldest should have gotten.
Yeah, and he was totally a punk about it too. He rubbed their
Yeah,
faces
so
in
it's
it, but-
possible that, like, Joseph was, like, buying into this stuff because he was jealous and envious of what belonged to his older brother.
Yeah. So jealousy, envy, they're bad.
Yep.
Right? And that actually leads us into our 10th command. So why don't you share with us what that is?
All right, it's Exodus chapter 20, verse 17. And God said this: "You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's."
So don't covet. Got to imagine that if Joseph's brothers had actually chosen to obey this command, And granted, they didn't have the command at that point, but like if they had chosen to obey the heart of this command, it probably could have saved them, their dad, and Joseph a whole lot of heartache.
Absolutely.
Now, quick question. How many of you guys know what it means to covet? All right, probably saw a couple hands there. We don't really know. We can judge by the back of the room. But let's start off with some definitions of what coveting even is. So, Stetson, why don't you tell us what coveting is?
Yeah, basically it's to want something that isn't yours. That's why all those things listed in the command, like it belonged to somebody else. And to want what someone else has is basically wanting something that doesn't belong to you. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious why God doesn't want us to just covet, like in our relationships with other people, because and we see this in that story with Joseph and his brothers, because coveting, right, desiring, wanting what is somebody else's, it is always going to lead to jealousy.
Yeah.
And jealousy, when it kind of gets deeply rooted in your own heart, it's always going to lead to hatred. I mean, his brothers, like, they were so focused on what he had and what they wanted and what they thought was theirs. I mean, they kind of got to that point where they thought, like, no, this is actually ours. Like, we deserve this more than you do. Like, it led them to the point where they literally destroyed his life, destroyed their father's life, and brought so much death and destruction into their family.
Yeah.
You see, the things that begin in our head, right, like the jealousy, it's always going to find its way to our heart. And once it makes its way to our heart, it's only a matter of time before it actually starts to manifest itself in some of the things we do. And we see that clearly here, right? It wasn't just like a bitterness of heart. They had that for years and years and years as they watched their little brother get all these things that they thought they deserved. And eventually they kind of reached that breaking point. And, maybe you've experienced this in your life too. Like, I know I have. Like, I think we all get there, right? Jealousy, coveting, it's so incredibly destructive.
Yeah, it's toxic. Like, if you've experienced it before, I don't know, it just feels like yuck.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, right? Like, the real problem with coveting isn't just that we want what somebody else has. Eventually, when we covet enough, and that kind of becomes our default way of thinking, we actually begin to convince ourselves that we deserve what they have. Right, it's not just theirs. Like, it should be ours, right? Like, you ever see Lord of the Rings, like Smeagol with the whole ring? Like, I think about him at the end there, where he's like, "It's mine, it's my own, it's my precious." It's like, dude, It was never yours, but like he coveted this thing, like, and it was just like, ugh. And then he fell into Mount Doom, not Mount Doom. What was it?
I think it is Mount Doom.
Mount Doom. All right, dude, got my Lord of the Rings.
Good job. But I think that's where the hatred comes in, because when you start to believe that the other person has something that actually belongs to you, that's when you start hating the other person.
Yeah, so let's get really practical here and talk about what coveting actually does in the context of our relationships, right? The first thing I think that happens is when we covet, it actually keeps us from being able to be happy for other people, right?
Yeah.
Like, it actually kind of puts this wedge in our relationship, right? Like, I think about back in college, I had a buddy of mine, his name was Justin. We were both doing ministry together. We were studying, Bible over at Azusa Pacific, and he landed a job in the high school ministry at Saddleback Church with Rick Warren. And if you don't know what that means, that's totally cool. Essentially, is one of the biggest churches in the country.
Right. In the church world, it'd be like getting into the NFL, and you're one of the quarterbacks. It's like
it was wild, like, for a guy his age to be hired to do that. And my default response to him telling me about this wasn't like joy, it wasn't happiness, it wasn't like, oh dude, that's so stinking cool. It was jealousy. Like, I coveted it, and it actually drove this wedge in between our friendship and our relationship, because I wasn't able to be happy for this thing that God had done for him.
Yeah.
I was so consumed saying, yeah, but I'm like a better communicator, I'm smarter, like, like this whole list of stupid stuff that isn't actually true. And I wasn't able to experience joy for him.
Yep.
And it was this really big problem. And I think it's probably true in your life as well, right? When we covet what somebody else has, when we get jealous of this thing that somebody else gets to experience, it keeps us from being able to be good friends. It keeps us from being able to be supportive friends. In essence, coveting is going to destroy our relationships.
Yep.
It really is. And when that happens, it's not going to lead to anything good. It's just going to lead to more bitterness.
Yeah, and loneliness too.
Yeah.
Like, you'll probably burn a lot of friendships, and you're left just bitter and alone.
Yeah.
Hooray.
Woo!
So that kind of like ties into like the next thing of like, not only does it keep you from being happy for other people, but it keeps you from like being able to enjoy what we have.
Yeah.
When I graduated from college, my wife and I, we worked basically like you could call it missionaries at UNC, at the college here in Greeley. And we had to raise our own support to be able to talk to college students about Jesus. So we would talk to family, like we would meet with all these people and say, hey, do you want to like support us financially and stuff? Well, one of our teammates, they had a connection with a very wealthy family, and that family supported them and basically funded like 25% of their whole budget. Like, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars that they did not have to spend fundraising. And on top of that, out of nowhere, they asked them to meet them somewhere, and they said, we're going to buy you a new car. And they just took them to the dealership, and they said, just pick whatever one you want, and we'll buy it for you. I was livid because I was driving a 1995 Ford Taurus that was falling apart. The windows didn't roll down. Like, it felt like it was falling apart. It made a weird noise when you made left turns. And it was just like, I hated my car. Like, I was unable to, like, every experience I had with the Ford Taurus after finding out that they got a new car, I was loathsome towards my Ford Taurus. It was terrible. I should show you guys a picture of it. It was a terrible car.
Yeah, but I think that illustrates really just the significance at this point. Like, when we're so focused on what other people have that we don't, it actually keeps us from being able to take joy in the things that we have, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about your car. You had a car.
Exactly.
You could drive around. Like, in parts of the world, there are people who literally walk miles uphill in the snow both ways just to get to school. Your parents have probably told you that one. But
probably that handcuffed couple in Ukraine. I doubt they have a car.
They probably don't. I mean, they handcuffed each other. But we take so many things for granted that are absolute gifts. Like, we all sleep in houses. We have beds. We had dinner tonight. Like, there are all these things that we have that we should be able to look at and say, thank you, God. Like, we have toilets that flush.
Yeah.
Right? Like, but when we're so focused on being jealous and coveting and what we don't have, we never get to appreciate the things that we do have.
Yeah.
And, truth be told, like, I think this command to not covet, it's probably one of the hardest ones for us here in America, because we live in a world that tells us we can never be satisfied. We always need something new, right? Like a new iPhone comes out and suddenly ours is too old and archaic and we just have to have this brand new one. You think about social media, right? Like, you get 1,000 followers on Instagram or whatever site it is you guys are using, and suddenly it's not enough. You need 2,000 because that's what your friend have. Like, we've been trained to never be satisfied.
Yeah.
And I think that's why people are living lives where they're never happy. I mean, you look at depression and anxiety, like all that stuff, it is on the rise. And yeah, there are a lot of like mitigating circumstances that impact that. But I think one of them is like, we have forgotten what it means to be content and to be satisfied. But the beauty is, it doesn't have to be this way, right? This isn't actually the way that we were created to live. And not coveting, right? This is the way forward. This is this thing that God has invited us into. And I know this is true because, like, I've seen it. A number of years ago, I got to go to Costa Rica with some high school students when I was working for a church down in Pueblo. And when we were in Costa Rica, like, the community that we were working with was not a wealthy community. Like, they didn't have cars, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have running water. But the one thing they had that a lot of those students I took with me didn't have, that a lot of people here in America don't have, was happiness. You see, for them, their happiness wasn't rooted in what they didn't have. It was rooted in what they had. They were content with the relationships. They were content with the things that God had given them, and it enabled them really to just say, you know what, like, we're good. Even though we had a bunch of, like, white kids from America come and saying, like, no, you're terrible, you're poor, let us help you. They're like, no, like, we're fine. Like, they taught us so much more than we taught them. And it was this really, really, really beautiful thing. And I think it's something we could all learn from.
Yeah.
We got to be content.
Absolutely. And I think there's something deeper to this, because I don't think we're saying all we need is an attitude change.
Yeah.
Of like, I mean, that's part of it for sure. I mean, just the other day, I was driving around. I don't know how this came up, but I was like, I can see, like, my eyes work. That's not the case for every person. Like, just the fact that I'm able to, like, look around is a gift. And that changed my attitude and my perspective. But the deeper thing is we were created with the deepest desire of being close with God.
Yeah.
That's whether we know this or not, that's everything that we're going after is ever since like the beginning where things started to fall apart. That's what we've been trying to get back to, is this closeness with God. And I think that's I know that's one of the big reasons why God is saying don't covet, is because we get distracted from that. And we start to think, we forget, it's like, oh, God is the thing that is going to like satisfy me. And we say, oh no, those shoes. Those are
just not the blood Nikes.
I know, I was about to bring that up. Or like the PlayStation 5, that's gonna satisfy me. Or the thing, because like personally, when I see something that I really want, I get distracted from this, and I start to believe it's like that thing. If I have that one thing, then I will be satisfied, and I start to get fixated on it, and I do everything that I can to get this thing, whether it belongs to someone else or not. I'm coveting this thing that, as of that time, doesn't belong to me, because I'm wanting to fill this emptiness. But you've experienced this before. You get that thing that you've always wanted, and shortly after you feel that emptiness again. It's just this bottomless pit. And normally that leads us to looking for thing after thing after thing. It's like, maybe this will fill me, this will fill me, this will fill me. But what I'm trying to do is trying to remember what I really want deep down is closeness with God. So when I get distracted and I get that thing and I feel empty again, instead of trying to find another thing, I try to just spend some time with God. And that could just be like talking to him. It could be reading about the things that he said in the Bible. It could be thinking about him. It could be talking with my friends about him. But when that happens, and this is really difficult to explain if you haven't experienced this before, but every time I do that, that emptiness gets filled up.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, like I don't feel that emptiness anymore. And I think a lot of you have experienced this too, because we've talked to a lot of you who have come back after like weeks and weeks and weeks of not coming. And you're always welcome back, no matter how long you've been gone. But a common thing that we hear when you come back after a really long time is like, wow, I didn't know how much I needed this.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you part of that is because there's this emptiness that can only be filled by closeness with God. And then you come here and you spend time thinking and hearing about God, and he feels close, and that emptiness fills up. I was walking around downtown Greeley, and I met this homeless person, and I helped him out with some cash that I had on hand. And we got talking, and I found out that he was a Christian, like he believed in God. And so we started talking. We had this incredible conversation, and we just, I don't know, it felt like we were like siblings at one point. We were just talking about how much we love this relationship that we have with God. And then this homeless guy who had nothing, he said something that shook me to my core. He said, the only thing that I'm lacking is seeing God's face.
Oof.
And he had this big smile on his face, and it's just like, he has more than I have. Like, he is experiencing less emptiness on the street with no possessions than I am, with a warm bed to sleep in at night and more possessions that I could ever need. And it's because he was touching into that. It's like the thing that we desire most that fills that emptiness is closeness with God. So the attitude change, like, it's like we can become happier for the people that we love. We can experience more joy in the things that we have, but by far the thing that keeps us from coveting is experiencing closeness with God.
Yeah. And I think the flip side of that too is when we get our priorities in line, right? Not only do we experience more joy and fulfillment and contentment, but I think it actually enables us to live our life with open hands, right? Because if we're not coveting, we see everything we have as a gift.
Yep.
And what do we do with gifts? We give them away, right? You know, and so I would just encourage you guys, and this ties into a lot of the other things we've talked about before, about no God before God, no idolatry, right? Like all of these different things. Like when we can have the heart of Jesus and do the things that Jesus has called us to do, we're actually going to be in a position to where we can live the kind of life that Jesus lived.
Yeah.
And Jesus gave up everything, and it was totally okay. Like, he was like, I'm not holding anything back, and there was no regret.
Yep.
And that's where I want us to get to. That's where I think God wants us to get to where we're not coveting things, trying to consume and to hoard. We're actually sitting there saying like, hey God, I'm going to use whatever you've given me. This is great. I'm going to enjoy it, whether it's a PS5 or a new phone or like whatever, but like, that's not my God. I will gladly give up all of this in the pursuit of you and in blessing other people.
Yep.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a very rare thing in this world. But when you see it, and you've probably seen it before, where somebody just has this audacious act of generosity, you're like, that's what this is supposed to be like.
Yeah.
And just like that homeless guy, there's a part of it that maybe brings a little shame to us. Not like bad shame or anything, but just like, oh man, like, I want that. And one of the keys is actively choosing to remove jealousy and kind of that covetousness from your life. I promise you will be much happier for it.
Yes.
So, Setson, we got a big idea. Why don't you give us the big idea before we break off into groups?
Yeah, the big idea is be content with the things that you have.
Yeah, be content. Because when you're content, you don't want more, and you're willing to give everything you have away.
Yep.
Cool. Well, hey, at this point, guys, we are going to break off into our house parties. Most of you guys know where you're going. If you're new, awesome, welcome. We'll get you into a house party, but we're going to kind of unpack this. And then, we will see you guys next week.